Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Well,
Wonderful.
welcome everyone to the 11th Niche Conversation. I'm Jessica DeWitt. I'm one of the editors at the Network in Canadian History and Environment. And today I am joined by Lauren Walker. Would you like to tell us more about yourself?
Hi, I'm Lauren Walker. I work as a cultural heritage specialist for a company called WSP. I do historical research and write reports for the environmental assessment process. And I wrote the commodification of hockey and Rupert's land.
Yes, you did. And this is part of our HBC 350 series. So this year, 2020 marks the 350th anniversary of the Hudson's Bay Company. So to mark this at NiCHE, we organized this, or I should say Blair Stein organized a series looking at the environmental history of the company over this whole massive time span. So on Twitter, you mentioned that you were really excited to be writing about the environmental history of hockey. So I thought we'd start off by maybe you want to talk about the personal connection you have to this topic.
Sure. Actually, came to environmental history through writing about hockey and about hockey history. Like I said, I work as a cultural heritage specialist, and one of the things I'm responsible for is identifying cultural heritage landscapes, significant cultural heritage landscapes in a place. Mm-hmm. And in 2016, 2017, I had gone to a couple of conferences to speak about a type of landscape that I thought was under-identified, and that's hockey cultural heritage landscapes, and that these kinds of landscapes, rinks and outdoor hockey facilities and natural ice was threatened by climate change. Mm-hmm. And there's some interest in cultural heritage, but some of the ideas and research methods didn't quite fit with the discipline. And at about the same time, I started following someone on Twitter, Jessica J. Lee, and I really admire her work. And she identifies as an environmental historian. I'm like, what is that? And I started to read and do research, and I'm like, all these people are thinking about the world and history in the way that I do, and using scientific methods and data to understand history, and looking at the way environments shape humans and impact history. And I came across the NiCHE website, and I saw that I could just submit an article. and so I wrote up my paper presentation on hockey CHLs and climate change, and I submitted it, and it was accepted. And I decided, this is what I do, and this is what I want to do. And I've always kind of felt like a person without a discipline. And I've always wanted to go to grad school, but didn't really know where I'd fit. And now I kind of have this long-term goal of, working up to my PhD in history with a focus on environmental history. And, once global and life conditions allow, the pandemic has delayed things a bit, and I have a career that I love and a family that's just kind of getting started. So, and I want to make sure that going to grad school doesn't negatively affect my mental health. So I have to be in a place where that is going to be okay. But in the meantime, I figure I can still write, and it makes me happy, and I love engaging with the niche crowd and learning from them and growing stronger in my writing. And right now I'm writing like a long form article, kind of expanding on my ideas about hockey and winter and landscape and the development of Canada and Canadian identity. And that's where the idea for the article on the commodification of hockey came from. And when I saw the call, I'm like, oh, I have an idea for that. And so, yeah.
Splendid. I love that answer. There's so many it's so pivotal. The topic is so pivotal to you, and I love that it brought you to us. Because your contributions have been wonderful lately. So in this article, one of the things that you look at a lot is this kind of concept of cold, and how the cold is related to Canadian identity and how Canadians see themselves. So I wonder if you would like to kind of talk about quote unquote cold and Canadian identity and how the hockey kind of plays into that.
Sure, yeah. So like cold and winter and Nordicity, or kind of like northernness, have been kind of fundamental to Canadian identity since, you know, for as long as there has been a Canadian identity. There's this idea that Carl Berger, I don't know how to pronounce anything, so describes in his essay. It's called True North, Strong and Free, I think, about how you know, people honestly believed that the cold climate of Canada was supposed to, you know, over time, after a couple generations, create this like robust and strong and powerful Britain of the North, and like how that after being exposed to, you know, such harsh conditions, you know, a respectable and manly and superior like Canadian race, as gross as that sounds, would emerge from these conditions. And they honestly believe this, you know, that the environment would, you know, very rapidly change the people who lived here into, you know, hardy, you know, people, and that southern climates would make people weaker, which is kind of, anyway. You see this over and over and over again in written 19th century accounts. You know, these people are like, you know, British people visiting Canada, they're like, the Canadians are these gods of winter and ice and snow, impervious to weather, and the Brits found it so overwhelmingly cold and hospitable, and it was a part of their kind of narrative about Canadian people, and I think it became a part of our own narrative about who we are very quickly. And, you know, like, and hockey, you know, well, early forms of hockey, you know, hurley and shinny and shinty and banty and Dworkin and all these other, you know, ice and stick games were played across Canada. You know, formal hockey, you know, what we know now as hockey, the organized sport was actually first formalized in Britain, and the first hockey clubs were in England and not in Canada at all. And hockey is the word that the British Army used to describe the sport. And so it's kind of seen as this like respectable British sport, but also very cold and very violent and more suited to Canadians. So like, while interest in hockey in Britain kind of waned in the early 1900s, the sport kind of exploded in popularity here because it fit our kind of narrative of who we are. And, you know, it's interesting. Blair Stein's work actually works to dismantle this idea. You know, she works with airplanes, and, you know, are we really this great northern people when, you know, 3 million of us fly to Florida, you know, every year? And one of the side effects of COVID is actually, this is like the first winter all Canadians will have to really contend with winter in a long time, you know. And like here in Toronto, all the rinks are booked. You know, you can't find an outdoor rink, and that hasn't happened for a long time. So
oh, that's interesting. I like that connection to contemporary times. And I didn't really know that much about the history of hockey in the UK, and that the British were kind of like the ones who initiated that. I didn't know that.
No one wants to. Yeah. Well, no one wants to talk about it. Like, and if you talk, like, this is very contentious, you know, like the actual origins of hockey is a very contentious topic, because there are a couple places in Canada that say, you know, no, we invented hockey, you know, and there are lots of historians who say, well, you know, it kind of evolved, but like, this is a point, you know, when we say it was invented, and you know, there is cultural exchange between, you know, the English and the Canadians continuously. So it's not like hockey developed in a vacuum or something like that. So
yeah, interesting. And then, like, I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, so the only cultural context I had for hockey was the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I didn't even like think of Canada in relation to hockey, right? So it's just interesting how we have our different placeholders and stuff.
And I grew up in southwestern Ontario, and our climate is basically the same as your climate in Pennsylvania. And we have this identity, like we're like these robust, cold people. And I don't know if you guys necessarily have that, you know, even though the climate is the same, you know. The history is different. So
that's interesting. Yeah, and also, I mean, your article makes me think, because Tina Adcock and other historians have been talking about how, even though Canada is a cold nation, a lot of the environmental history that we write about is about the summer months and the spring and the fall. We don't write as much about the winter, even though, you know, it's 6 months long here. So it's kind of those ideas of seasonality and stuff in winter have really it made me think, when I see something about the winter, it really stands out to me and makes me think about how I can approach my research differently. So,
Yeah, and that's
um,
like, I think partially why I started writing again about this, because I'm like, oh, actually, there's that
mhm,
gap here that I didn't
yeah,
know existed before, and I have some things to say. So,
yeah,
I
yeah,
might as well say them.
exactly. You gotta make that first step. So the main point of your article is looking at the commodification of hockey. So I wonder for our last part of our chat today, maybe if you could talk about what commodification is, because some people may not have like a strong grasp of what that means, right? And then kind of maybe take a few examples from your article about how the Hudson's Bay Company commodified hockey.
So commodification is the process that you turn something into a commodity. So, a good or a product that could be standardized and sold interchangeably. So wheat is a commodity. It doesn't matter where wheat comes from. It's
Mhm.
always wheat, and it's graded, and it's understood to be, the same no matter what. And you kind of sell it as if, it doesn't matter which farm wheat comes from, for example.
Yeah.
And for hockey, this happened in a number of ways. And I talk about kind of the formalization of the support. But usually people think of the commercialization of hockey like through the professionalization. So, the NHL and, selling the sport and having spectators come, and, Hockey Night in Canada and the CBC. But my article kind of looks at another way hockey was commodified, and that's through the standardization and sale of equipment.
Mhm.
Specifically hockey sticks in my case, but also, pucks and skates and other gear, and which kind of traveled along with the formalization of the rules of hockey to formalize it in Canada. So for a long time, there was no standard hockey stick. They could be long or short, or look more like a club, like a field hockey club like stick, or have large flat blades, or a mixture. Everyone have a different stick on the team. And the McGill hockey team had their own kind of like style of club stick that was their stick, and pucks could be made out of wood or stone, and they could be round or they could be square, and people use balls. Skates could be used or not used. People were necessarily required. But if you want to formalize a sport so that two teams on the opposite sides of a country could be on even ground, you need like standard rules and standard equipment and a way of for people to get that equipment. And the Hudson's Bay Company was more of a vehicle for that than anything. The connecting manufacturers to consumers, beyond kind of their local context, and beyond kind of like strange, connections where people know, hey, these people use sticks, we're going to get enough sticks for one team or something like that. And so the HBC, in their catalog, they sold one stick and one puck and one or two types of skates. And people in Winnipeg were using the same standard stick as people in New Brunswick at the same time, which wouldn't have been possible before kind of the HBC connected them to this kind of larger consumerist capitalist network of manufacturers. And the HBC did this to all sorts of aspects of Canadian life. Like someone could have written the same article about, sewing machines or dry goods or carpentry tools. The HBC, though, they brought capitalism in, which is in their worldview, and in our worldview, is considered to basically be civilization, to the frontier. And hockey was more of a lens to kind of focus and understand this narrative around Canadian identity. And because it's so tied to our environment, it's a particularly effective lens, I think. Hockey is very important in Canada, as I'm sure as a person not from here maybe has noticed. Unusually important to Canada. I think like if you took all the rinks across the world, and compared them to the number of rinks just in Canada, there are more in Canada than anywhere else, completely in total. So it's a huge part of our landscape and our identity. So
Mhm. I think that's it's just a fascinating mind exercise to think about how important these standardized goods are to creating the identity that we now are
Yeah, yeah,
surrounded
definitely.
by.
Yeah,
It's kind of dystopia.
yeah, no,
um,
and like trying to understand like what even is Canadian identity and what even is
yeah.
Canadian culture now, and you get to this place where I think I saw a tweet. It was like, Canada is like a bunch of corporate alliances, like Tim Hortons and and that's you can't have a country that is exclusively commercials that we see, right? And
Yeah.
so what at the base of it, what are we, and
Mhm.
who are we? And I think that's I guess in the past and then now, that our environment helps shape that. That's kind of what I
Mhm.
wonder to understand.
Awesome. Well, this has been a really great chat. I enjoyed it thoroughly, and I
Thank you. I
encourage
enjoyed it too.
everyone to
Thank you
check
for
out the article on our website. Um, yeah, thank you for your time today, Lauren.
thank you. Thanks for inviting me and chatting with me. And
Yeah,
I'll talk to you later. All right.
take care.
Bye.